Okay, it is 10:30, so I think we are going to officially get started. So want to welcome everyone to our Safety Connection on the initiative for marinas by the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, Skills Program Coordinator, and myself, Tanya Mueller, a consultant with workplace I can't even say the name of our organization. Great start today for Workplace Safety and Prevention Services. And I also have account manager Crystal Egan with us as well. So I want to welcome everyone and just let you know that this session is recorded. So a disclaimer that it is protected by copyright. However, we will be sharing the slides for folks afterwards. So that's always a common question that we get. So Ministry has been gracious enough to grant us permission to share these afterwards with you. There is the demographic slide with the QR code or the link you can click on to complete that short demographic survey. You will need a 6-digit function number, which is on the slide. It is also in the chat. So here is the, sorry, I did not mean to advance that slide. Here is the 6-digit function number that you will need. So if you folks wouldn't mind completing that survey, that would be much appreciated, but it will be accessible throughout the presentation. Just some housekeeping slides. We are using the computer audio, which is the recommended audio, but there is a phone conference code should you have difficulties. Everyone's microphone will be muted throughout the session. However, at the end, we will have a Q&A period in which if you raise your virtual hand, we can take you off of mute and we can answer your questions live. However, your cameras will remain off throughout the session. But we would like this to be somewhat interactive, so save up your questions. We will take them at the end. You can certainly put the questions in the chat throughout the session, but once again, we will address it at the end of the presentation. But feel free to use those reactions and give us applause and thumbs up, or even if you think we're kind of funny, you can laugh at us as well. We do have some accessibility features. So if you'd like to turn on the live captions, you can click on the 3 dots in somewhat near the top right corner. The drop-down menu, hit language and speech, and then turn on live captions. If you'd like the screen in a larger view, there is an icon that looks like this at the top of your screen. Click on that, use more options, and then click on full screen mode. So what are the goals of our Safety Connections? We run Safety Connections on multiple topics, and each time our goal is to learn, share, and discover what's of value to you. We want to be sharing information that's relevant, that's pertinent, and it's going to help you in your workplace. We want to connect you virtually with your peers. We want to talk about best practices and the convenience of being able to attend from your personal workspace and share more information with more people across the province. So our agenda for this morning, and we are going to 12 o'clock today, is I'm going to be turning the presentation over to Will Bubbles from the ministry, and he's going to be speaking about the Marina Initiative. And then I'm going to come back on and provide some resources to help you comply and to prepare your workplace to be a safer place. And then we're going to leave time for some Q&A at the end. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Will, if you wouldn't mind taking control and take us away.
All right, excellent. Good morning, everybody. My name is Will Gubbles. I'm a regional program coordinator with the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, and Training and Skills Development. I'll just say Ministry of Labor, a lot easier to say. So my role as a regional program coordinator is I've worked for the Ministry for 21 years. The first 16 years as an inspector in the field, and the last 5 years as a regional program coordinator, where I'm the technical advisor to the inspectors, and I also develop training for aspects like this. We have provincial initiatives or campaigns, and we also have regional initiatives, which is what this is. And one of the reasons that we had this, that we picked this as a regional initiative, is that we canvass our inspectors and we say, what are you guys seeing out there? What are you, where would you like to do a regional initiative? Where you, want to go do inspections at? And one that they came back with was marinas, because they've been saying we've been getting into marinas, and we think that maybe a regional initiative might be good to get out there and do some inspections and do some education in there as well. So that's how that was picked. One of the reasons that was picked. I'll move along to the next one. Okay, so today's objective is to just give you a bit of background on our, it's the East Region Initiative for the marinas. We're going to outline the expectations and focus of our of the initiative and provide information and resources to assist you guys. So why focus on marinas? So there was a fatality in this sector in 2021. There's been 20 lost time injuries and 15 no lost time injuries in this sector since 2020. There's been 45 events. So events are things that come into the Ministry of Labor, as could be complaints, could be an accident, could be a work refusal, those types of things. So we call those all events where an inspector has to react to something. So we've had 45 of those events reported to the ministry from January 2022 to December 2025. So there was 167 field visits conducted to marinas, and of those, 77% of them were in the eastern region. So of the 167, 46% of them were in the east. So I think that's why our inspectors said, you know what, I think we need to do an initiative here. We're going into these places. And you can see 236 orders were issued by the ministry, and 13 of those were stop work orders. So that means that a stop work order, if you've never been inspected by the ministry, it's something where they found it to be, say, a killer contravention, where if we don't stop this action or this machine or something that's happening, a worker could get killed. We call it a killer contravention. So that's why the stop work orders were put in place, because of something like that. And, and one of the things we're quite sure of, that many events in the sector go unreported, so that the numbers are probably lower than they actually are. That's right, I'm in charge. So why are we focusing on marinas? So the, one aspect is the workforce does generally employ younger, seasonal, and vulnerable workers. And the tasks associated with loading and unloading the boats are very hazardous. So workers are generally, at this time, under time constraints as well. So those are the things we're going to be focusing on too. So that's one of the reasons why we chose this as well. Compliance. So this is what, with the inspectors, when we're doing the initiative, we're going to be focusing on, of course, compliance with the regulation, with the Act and regulations. So the Occupational Health and Safety Act and all the associated regulations. And here are some of the other regulations that the inspectors will be enforcing there. So in the industrial establishments regulations, where that might be applicable, control and exposure of biological and chemical agents, WHMIS, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. So if you're dealing with the chemicals, WHMIS controlled products, whatnot. Health and safety awareness training, so both for worker and supervisor training. Notices and reports. So these we're going to be asking about whether you know your requirement to report. Do you guys know the definition of a critical injury, when you need to notice to them, when you need to send notice to the Ministry of Labor, if there's been an accident, as far as, and as well, if you're having a construction project going on at your workplace, you need to put in a notice of construction, a notice of project, to let us know that you're having this going on there. So those again questions we're going to be looking at and enforcing. And one of the newer ones is BOSTA, which is Building Opportunities in the Skilled Trades Act. So this is the aspect of the trades. So I think if you've been around a while, you might have heard of the Ontario College of Trades, OCOT. And so this is the OCOT has been disbanded, and now BOSTA has been created. And so now our inspectors, our occupational health and safety inspectors, are now also BOSTA inspectors. So they wear two hats. They're going to be looking at the health and safety side, and then they could change hats and put on their BOSTA hat and then start asking about, well, skilled trade. So if you're hiring electricians in your workplace, are you hiring an electrician with a CFQ, Certificate of Qualifications? Are you hiring, say, a plumber? Anything that, mechanics, those types of things, are they, complying by BOSTA? So these are questions that the inspectors will be asking when we go through there as well. And workplace parties are required to comply with the applicable Act and regulations. So during the inspection, this is what the inspector is going to be focusing on to continue. So they're going to be looking at your orientation training. So when a new employee gets hired, what are you doing with them when they first start, their first day, the first week? What type of orientation training are you doing with them? Are you reviewing WSPS with them, their awareness training, the hazards that they're going to be encountering? And, so that's one of the important things that we always ask right off the bat. Okay, are you doing orientation training? And just to carry on to that too, is when we go in there, we're going to ask, okay, do you do orientation training with your new workers? So yeah, okay, who was a recently hired worker? Let's see their documentation. Let's pull their file and see what type of training. Documentation is very important for health and safety. It's it's your due diligence. And unfortunately for us, during some investigations and accident investigations, the worker is killed on the job. So you, as an employer, are depending on your documentation to prove that that worker was trained. And we're also depending on that during an investigation as well to prove that, that the worker was trained to be doing or they weren't trained, that kind of aspect. So it's important to have that documentation in place, to say that, oh yeah, we just, so-and-so went through it with them. It's important to have it documented. I know we're trying to get away from a paperless society, but not for health and safety. We're going to look at whether you got a copy of the Occupational Health Safety Act and Prevention Starts Here poster. We're going to look at your occupational health and safety policy that you have in place, prevention of workplace violence and harassment policies. If you've got 20 or more workers, do you have a joint health and safety committee in place? Are they functioning? Are there certified members? Are you doing your meetings, inspections? Or if you're under 20, do you have a worker health and safety representative in place? Between 6 and 19, do you have a worker health and safety representative in place? And then are they doing their monthly inspections? Do workers know who the health and safety representative is in the workplace? That's a question that we always ask, like, okay, so if a new worker that started, you have a health and safety representative here. Do you know their name? Do you know who they are? And so that's part of the orientation as well, is introduce the new workers to the health and safety representative that they have in the workplace so that they know who to go to if they have health and safety concerns. Again, part of the IRS, the Internal Responsibility System. We ask about your emergency procedures and were any workplace specific hazards that you may have and how are you dealing with it. So these are some of the sectors that we'll be inspecting is boating, sailing and yacht clubs that have operating marinas, boat yards, docking and or storage, standalone marinas, resorts that include a marina facility, pleasure boat rentals, and retail marina sales if associated with a marina. And the initiative is running from May 1st to October 30th. Running at least during the summer months and into your busy season of when you're taking the boats out. So the goals of the initiative is mainly to encourage the employer to identify the hazards related to workers so that you can put corrective actions in place, develop and implement control measures and procedures. So again, it's that aspect of encouraging the employer to do the risk assessment, look at their workplace, look at their hazards, do a risk assessment to determine, okay, what are the hazards that we have here, put control measures in place, training that, the workers need to keep them safe. We all want the same thing at the end of the day, is that everybody goes home safe. One of the goals is to act as a deterrent for employers that are non-compliant with the Act and regulations. That's I think we all know that once if an employer gets orders or gets charged or whatnot, that gets around the industry pretty quick, and so it does act as a deterrent in these sectors. Promote sustained improvement to workplaces culture regarding occupational health and safety. So again, putting the IRS in place and having it back on you for you to be doing it. Sometimes we can come in and just give a little bit of maybe issue a few orders to help get you up to where you need to be. Maybe you're just here, but you just need a little bit of encouragement to get up a little bit further. And enhance partnerships with the health and safety associations, which we're doing today. That's what we're working with WSPS for this, and it'll encourage yourselves as well to work with your health and safety associations, other stakeholders to help help them reduce the injuries in Ontario. So here are some of the hazards that we will be focusing on when we're looking in there. So these are it's not a complete list, but these are some of the things that just maybe spark your risk assessment focus to see, oh yeah, I never thought of that. Maybe I should be looking at that. So these are some of the things the inspectors will be focused on doing the inspections. Is slips, trips, or falls due to debris or uneven walking surfaces. So we do know that some of the areas are uneven walking surfaces, and we're not expecting everything to be completely flat, but is there debris? Is there things that the inspectors or that the workers could be tripping over, falling over, that the employer can address? So they're looking at working at heights. So are there times when the workers are going into a raised area? Do they have the training? Do they have the proper equipment? Do they know how to select are they using the proper equipment? The right harnesses, the right lanyards, that type of thing. We're going to be looking to how to inspect them, that type of thing. So those are things that we'll be looking at. Working on or near water. And I know WSPS has a handy resource for that, because I know you definitely will be working around water. Machinery operation, forklifts and cranes. We always have injuries every year related to struck by injuries where workers are being hit and even killed by forklifts and cranes and whatnot. So it's definitely one thing we're going to be looking at is, how is the machinery moving around here? What if it goes into areas where there are workers? And or even members of the public, how are you protecting that? The pedestrian flow, that type of thing. Rigging and hoisting, are the workers trained on proper rigging and hoisting? Are you using, again, back to BOSTA, or is your hoisting equipment being utilized by a proper hoisting operator, whether it be a class 1 or class 2? Are the workers trained on the proper selection of their their slings and whatnot? Are they being inspected? Are they in good shape so that you don't drop and injure workers? Working in the vicinity of operating a machinery. There's all different types of machinery that I'm sure you use in a marina. So just if workers have to work in those vicinities. Working alone. Again, you could, if you have some workers that are working alone, what other precautions are in place do you have to keep them safe? Yeah, use of propane heaters and fuel-fired appliances, mainly looking at carbon monoxide poisoning. We do have a few of those every year as well, because misfiring appliances, and then the carbon monoxide is generated, and it's odorless, so people are succumb to it very quickly. Electrical hazards. So we're going to ask about that again. Back to BOSTA. Are you hiring appropriate people to do your electrical work? Fire hazards, heat stress. Heat stress could be a big one, depending. Not this year so far. We definitely didn't have a lot of heat stress issues yet, but hopefully it'll come. But, what are you putting in place? Again, there's lots of good resources out there for doing a heat stress analysis and putting measures and procedures in place for protecting your workers from heat stress. Chainsaw operations. So are you doing some work around, cutting some trees, cutting some bushes and whatnot? Are you doing it yourself? Are you doing it, hiring a certified arborist, that type of thing? We're going to be asking about operation of vehicles. So moving around the marina, operating boats yourself, maybe ATVs, that type of thing. Lack of maintenance and annual inspection of lifting devices. So as you know, all lifting devices need to be inspected at least annually. So we're going to be looking for the annual inspection of the lifting devices, and we're also going to be looking at the maintenance of it. What kind does it look like in good shape? One of the aspects of the lifting devices, and for bringing in the boats and whatnot, I'm going to go back a couple of slides here just to show you this picture here. So you can see the lower picture at the bottom here with the blue crane. Sometimes these lifting devices are, they originally come with maybe like a 4-foot forks on it, and the employer purchases an attachment with the longer forks to be able to accommodate the lifting of boats and whatnot. So now the lifting capacity of that lifting device is now altered, because it's not, now it's the forks are longer, so the lifting capacity is limited now because the forks are that much longer. So the forklift the forklift operator needs to know, okay, what is the capacity now that I've added this attachment? What is the capacity? And there should be, that should be certified through your lifting device operator, where maybe we purchased the forklifts, so certified through your forklift provider, so that when the inspector comes in, they're going to say, okay, I see you have an attachment for that forklift now, because it now has 8-foot forks or however longer. What is the lifting capacity now? And that's something that you guys should be able to show the inspector. Just jump back to where I was. I went too far. Safe storage of gasoline and other flammables kind of goes with the fire hazards. Where are you storing them? Is it a safe manner? Is there no smoking in the area? That type of thing. Insect-related hazards. If there's a hornet's nest, how are you guys addressing that? Plant-related hazards, purple loosestrife, those types of things. Wild parsnip. If you have that in the area, how are you handling it? Are the workers being made and doing some awareness training with the workers so that they are able to identify these plants and not to handle them? And again, handling of controlled products. So the WSPS training as required. We're going to look at we may even dig a bit deeper and look at, okay, you did the WSPS training with the workers. Do you have the safety data sheets? Are they available? Okay, let's pick a product that you have in the workplace. Let's go find the safety data sheet for it and see if you have it and see how fast you can find it if you need be. So we sometimes will do those little practices to see how quick you can find the safety data sheet. And a lot of times we do that when we see the safety data sheet that's this thick, and there's no rhyme or reason to the safety data sheets. They're all just put in together, not alphabetical order or whatnot. Say, okay, I just splashed this chemical in my face, or the person consumed it. Let's go find the safety data sheet, and just a little exercise that's done to show that there needs to be some sort of organization so we can find it very quickly. And again, I'm just going to jump a little to that heat stress one a bit, because it is one we have every year. We have workers that actually die from heat stress in the workplace. So it's important to do some of that awareness training with your workers so that that they are aware of the signs and symptoms of heat stress. And then you, as the employer, put measures and procedures for the workers to recognize those hazards and put something in place so that precautions to prevent it from happening. So it could be lots of breaks, could be having availability of popsicles or lots of liquids to drink. If they're going to be away from the marina for a while, make sure that they're taking liquids with them, that type of thing. And this is the point. I will jump over to, I'll pass it over to Tanya to take over, because she'll be speaking about the resources.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Will, for that. That's amazing. Now, we are ahead of schedule for time. So I was thinking maybe before I jump into resources, if anybody has some burning questions, that we have some time before I get into the resources, and we'll do it again at the end. So if anybody has any questions, I've got one possibly for Will. When you went through who this initiative applies to, you had mentioned that it was not for marine retail. So just wanted to clarify that if I'm a marine retail, so I sell boats, I repair boats, but I'm not on the water, I don't have a marina, am I included in this initiative?
No, you're not.
Okay.
No.
You've mentioned this is an Eastern Ontario initiative, because it's a regional versus a provincial at this point, but we all know that regional initiatives sometimes gain some speed and momentum and could develop into provincial initiatives. But the Eastern region includes areas such as Muskoka, Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland. Is that fair to say? Is there any?
That's right. Yep. And right to the Eastern region goes right to the Quebec border, east right to the Quebec border. So Cornwall, Hawkesbury, all the way along there, Kingston, Trenton, so all those areas along there.
Okay.
Yeah, so and that does happen a lot actually with the regional initiatives. We, at the end of the initiative in October, we'll gather up all the numbers, see how the initiative went, and if it, was a very successful initiative, getting out to a lot of workplaces, and we're seeing that we might be providing a lot of assistance to workplaces that, in the form of orders and whatnot, then, it might be something that they will look at provincially, because there is marinas all over the province, and say, okay, it might be a good one that we should do as a provincial initiative rather than just a regional one.
Okay, excellent. Now, I get a lot of questions around lifting devices. You touched on that's certainly something that the inspectors will be looking at. But maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on what makes a competent operator for a lifting device. You talked about certification for hoisting class 1 and 2. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit more about the requirements for lifting devices?
Okay, so I'll start on the operators first. So the lifting device operators in the Occupational Health Safety Act and industrial regulations, our regulations and legislation does not say that they need to have a certificate. It says that they need to be a competent operator, and competency is defined as knowledge, skill and knowledge, education, and
awareness of hazard.
Yeah. So anyway, so you could be a lifting device operator, and you have been doing it for 20 years. So just because you don't have a certificate doesn't mean that you're experienced. It doesn't mean that you're not a competent worker. If you operate the forklift every day, 8 hours a day or even a couple hours a day, so you are competent on it because of experience. You know, that's how we would look at it as well. And one of the aspects the employer or the inspector could look at as well is say, okay, you know what? Get on the forklift and show me that you're competent. And, you know, go over there, pick up that pallet, put it up there, that type of thing. So, you know, it might be a demonstration aspect, because there are times where we have seen inspectors, or sorry, workers operating a forklift, and they do have a certificate, but they're definitely not competent. We had an incident in Ottawa here a little while ago where an employer had hired a quite a respectable forklift company to come and recertify their workers. One had to be a fully trained, and the other one had to be recertified. And the training company was there for 11 minutes and gave them certificates and left. So the employer actually called us and said, "Is this right?" So and you know, we followed up on it. So you know, those would people, you know, especially the one that needed the full training, would not be considered a competent worker, because, you know, 11 minutes of forklift training is not adequate. So these are things that we're going to be looking at, is the competency of the operator of the forklift, competency on the equipment that they are operating as well. Because we do see that once in a while that you know, an operator may be certified on a stand-up forklift in warehouses, and now they're going to this workplace and they're dealing with a counterbalance forklift, or instead of the stand-up. So, you know, they may have been competent on the other machine, but not this type of machine. So, and then the hoisting as well, you know, with we're talking about the type of hoisting operators. If you're going to be using cranes, you know, whether it's you're a hoisting engineer for mobile cranes, class 1 or 2, we're going to be looking for your certificate of qualifications for that. And we're going to be asking to see that, because under the WSPS Act, it does say that the operator needs to have their certification on them when they're operating the hoist. So we would expect to have that, you know, be able to go up to the crane operator and say, okay, are you certified on this? Yes, I am. Okay, show me your certificate. And they need to have it with them.
And would that include, so let's say it's fall time, I'm pulling boats out of the water, or now I'm putting them in the water and they've been suspended in the boat slips and I'm using kind of a chain hoist. Does that certification apply in those type of scenarios?
It depends on the equipment that they're using. It depends if it's a mobile crane. Let's see, so there's 3 types of cranes. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at my list on my board here. There are 3 types of crane: the mobile crane operator 1 and 2, and then a tower crane operator. So I'm sure you're not using the tower cranes to remove these, but yeah, so that's what we would be looking at. Those are the ones that apply under Boston.
Okay, so if I'm just lifting, I'm using a chain hoist, for example, I'm securing it on the boat slip. I'm just providing training myself to my employees to be able to safely operate that chain hoist.
Yeah, and we're looking at, okay, is the operator, again, goes back to the rigging and hoisting. Are they being trained on the proper use of that equipment? Is the equipment being used in a proper configuration? Because I know a lot of the chain hoists should be only used in a vertical configuration. Are they being used horizontal? Or maybe they're not designed for that. So those are things that you need to take into account as well. Is it being used? Is it the right tool for the job? So.
Okay, and I do see a question in the chat about how are mast cranes considered?
I'm a mast crane, if it falls under one of the mobile crane, a mast crane being like a forklift. Like I'm not sure what you mean by a mast crane.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly either what that's referring to.
Oh, fixed on the ground. Well, then we would consider that a lifting device. So then there's no, actually, it wouldn't probably fall under the WSPS Act, but it would fall under a lifting device. So then the person would still need to be a competent operator.
And just to refresh, definition of competency is you're experienced in how to operate that lifting device. You know what the hazards are. So if it fell over, what could go wrong? If you overload it, kind of those kinds of things. So it's knowledge of the task, knowledge of the hazards, and knowledge of what the Act and regulations say. So those 3 things make up competency.
Competency, experience, training, and knowledge. So yeah, that's right. So.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, here's one in the chat. How would competency be applied at sailing clubs where the boat owners use club equipment to launch their own boats? They're not workers, but workers may be working nearby.
Good question. Yep, absolutely. And there with the under the Occupational Health Safety Act and regulations, we only have jurisdiction to workers. However, you need to understand too that the definition of a critical injury and the definition of the requirement to report involves a person. So if a person is injured at your workplace, you need to report it to the Ministry of Labor. It doesn't say worker, says a person. So because a lot of times if a member of the public is injured, it could have been a worker. So we're still, the employer still has some duties under the legislation to make sure that those members of the public are safe too, because it could be, especially if they're working around, if the workers are working in close vicinity, they could be injured by what the member of the public is doing.
Yeah, I'm thinking this might be similar. I mean, you need to protect your workers because as an employer, that's your primary responsibility. Similar to if you have workers that are going out collecting shopping carts in a parking lot, you're protecting that worker where the shopping carts may be corralled. You're looking at proper training of them. You're hopefully providing them with high visibility vests. You are taking precautionary measures to protect the worker from something that the public or someone else may do to hurt them. I would think that would be somewhat similar in that scenario.
And that's where the hazard risk assessment comes into place, that you need to look at look at what's happening in your workplace in that, where the sailing club boat owners are installing their own boats and say, okay, what are the hazards that my workers could be exposed to here? And, there are times where, my workers, maybe I don't want them in that area. And there's times where if they're going to be in that area, here's the precautions that need to be in place.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm sure we may have some more as you think about what we've just talked about, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take control from Will, and I'm going to move on to the resource slides to help you comply with what you need to do. So first off, WSPS, we can help. We provide free resources. You can find a lot of these resources on our website at WSPS.ca. We also provide complimentary consulting, so I'll go over what we can do to help you. But we also do more than that. We provide training, we do certification training, as well as we have the WSIB Health and Safety Excellence Program that we're a sponsor for. So that is a financial incentive program in which you can join. And if you're listening to this webinar going, oh my goodness, I don't have a lot of these procedures, I don't have a lot of these safety programs in place, this is a good time to join the program because WSIB will pay you in the form of rebates as you work on your program. So excellent health and safety program to join. So first off, I'm going to go over some of the general resources because those are some of the things that Will started off by saying is when they come on to any workplace, they're looking for the general things such as training, your postings, your policies, etc. So if you don't have a worker handbook, we have a orientation handbook generator. It's kind of like a plug and play. You input some of your information and it is going to generate an employee handbook for you. Great resource available free on our website. So after this webinar, you're going to be receiving an email with a link for all of these resources that you can access. We'll also mention that all workers in Ontario, not just marinas, need basic worker awareness training, and the supervisors need the basic awareness training as well. The ministry has created a free online e-course to be able to comply with that, so you're going to get links to that information. We currently have for a lot of free, actually until September 30th, many of our e-courses are free, so please take advantage of that for multiple different topics. But Will specifically mentioned they're going to be looking for WMIS and WMIS training, your safety data sheets, etc. So the WMIS General Online Training Program right now is free from our website. Now, that's not all that you need to do. Remember, you do still need to provide the workplace specific WSPS training, which basically means training your workers on the chemicals that they are exposed to. What are the hazards? How do they protect themselves? What do they do in the event of a spill? And it's specific to your workplace. Next, we have a great article on new worker training and things you need to consider to ensure that you're meeting your legal requirements. The next category is the required posting. So there's many things that you are obligated legally to post in your workplace. So that link's going to take you to where you can get that information. So not only the Prevention Starts Here poster, but you're going to find links for the Employment Standards Act, the WSIB 123 poster, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, other requirements for postings from the committee. You're going to find all that information in that link there. If you don't have a health and safety policy, that needs to be posted, assuming you're 5 or more workers. So you want a template. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't start from scratch. There is a sample policy. As well, there is information on how to develop that program and information you need to prepare it within the guide to the Occupational Health and Safety Act that the ministry has created. So you're going to find a link to that document. Violence and harassment is another thing that I believe they may be asking about. So in order for you to understand what your requirements are, have some sample policies and procedures, the first link is a great resource. We've also just launched our new violence risk assessment tool, in which a violence risk assessment is a legal requirement for all workplaces. If you have not completed that violence risk assessment, that tool will walk you through completing it, and by the end of it, you can print it. You'll have your violence risk assessment. So if they ask for it, you are prepared.
If I can just jump in there, if you can go back for a second,
absolutely.
and that is an important one that I'd like to highlight as well. It's to utilize that tool. It is a big one that we go into, and we will ask to see the violence and harassment policies and programs in place, and the workplaces that will not have done a violence risk assessment, which is the important, which is actually should have been the first step in developing your violence prevention program, because you have to identify where the risks of violence are in your workplace, because they may be different for specific marinas depending on location, depending on where the workplace is located and whatnot. So it's important. That's one of the things we look at. We also ask about the risk assessment, because it's important. You have to gear your prevention of workplace violence program based on your risk assessment. So that is things inspectors will be asking when they come in to see that risk assessment. So it's a fantastic tool that's been developed. I looked at it. It's really good for the employers. I'll touch on a couple of other ones under training as well. The basic awareness training, as Tanya mentioned, there's a training online, or an e-training on the Ministry of Labor. Just a reminder that we do not track that training. So once the workers and the supervisors do that awareness training, they need to save the certificate or take a picture of it, something as proof of training, because once they close off that link, it's gone. So they need to save that. And it's a one-time thing. Once the worker or supervisor do it once, they don't have to do it again. So that's why it's important to have that record. And that's what we're looking for. That's what the inspector's looking for when they come in and say, did you do your awareness training? Yes, we did. Okay, show me the certificates. Show me proof that they have done it. So that's what we're looking for. And if they didn't save those certificates, they have to do it again. So, and then just a reminder about the WSPS as well, that there is 2 components to the WSPS training, the generic training and the workplace specific, and she did touch on that. So we're going to be looking at, okay, you've done the generic training about, what is the safety data sheet, what is the labels and stuff like that. But then now you want to do workplace specific training with your workers related to what chemicals are they dealing with, and where are they, and where are the safety data sheets located at your workplace, that type of thing. Even review safety data sheets with them, make sure that they have the personal protective equipment when they're handling that type of thing. So thanks.
Yeah, and just to highlight the basic awareness training on the ministry website, make sure you just put in your name, and as Will says, it prints out a PDF certificate. So that's what you want it to save. So make sure you actually do that last step. I believe it's on the last slide where it asks you to input your name and keep a copy of that certificate. Okay, so other general resources. If you have 6 to 19 workers, you just need a worker health and safety rep, You still need to be doing monthly inspections. So if you're looking for a checklist to help you with the monthly inspection, there's a sample in the resources. If you prefer kind of a blank document, just like a recording form, that's up to you on how you document the workplace inspections. We're providing you some of those tools. If you have 20 or more workers on a regular basis, and the ministry defines regular as more than 3 months. So if you go above that magic number of 20, you're going to need a health and safety or joint health and safety committee. There's great documents in those links, provides an overview of what the committee does, what their requirements are. We have sample templates for the meeting forms, agendas to help you document what you need should the ministry ask. Usually what I've heard, and Will, you can confirm this, if an inspector goes on site and you've got a larger workplace, you need a committee, they're going to ask to see usually maybe the last 2 to 3 meeting minutes, which kind of proves that, yes, it is being done on a regular basis. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We'll ask that because one thing we want to see on top of that is that, okay, you're having the meetings, but are you addressing the hazards that are being identified, that are being discussed? If we see the same item 3 months or 3 meetings in a row or 3 inspections in a row, it's like, why is this not being addressed? It's because it looks like the worker and the management reps on the committees are doing a good job identifying the hazards, putting them on the list. And so where's the chain breaking down? Is it the employer? Is it somewhere along the line that, they've done their job, but why is it not getting addressed?
Excellent. And you also briefly touched on emergency planning. And the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety has some great resources to help in developing that planning. Now, keep in mind, they've been developed for kind of all businesses and sectors, but it is a great starting point to help you with your planning. There's a checklist to think about what things have you considered, what may you have forgotten. But really, what you need to do is think about what could go wrong and what are my controls? So what could go wrong? Somebody could fall in the water. Okay, they're a great swimmer, but how do they get out of the water? Where is the nearest ladder to get them out? What if they've just hit their head on the boat as they have fallen in the water? Now they're unconscious. What is your plan to get them out? Where do you go and get the board, the life-saving device, the life preserver ring, the heaving line, that sort of thing? When the emergency happens, that's not the time to scramble and think about, oh my goodness, where do I go to get that? What about just monitoring weather conditions? What is your plan? Should a tornado come up or some other storm, thunderstorm? What are your emergency procedures? Plan ahead. There's a great article on 16 tips to strengthen your emergency response plan. So have a look at that when you're developing and thinking about what could go wrong at my marina, what could go wrong at my workplace, and how am I going to address and deal with it at the time? Where are all my emergency contact numbers? That sort of thing. Do I even get cell phone reception at the marina? Where is the nearest landline? Next, we have tips on new and young workers. So there's 15 tips to getting safety measures across to young workers. Also some great videos that have been created. Will alluded to these. These are some of the really great hazard-specific resources. There's been multiple documents created for working near and on water. So there's waterfront safety, dock hazards, motorized watercraft, as well as non-motorized watercraft. So if you look at the screenshot on the right-hand side of my slide, there's the first page. And each of these documents, they range from about 10 to 15 pages each, but this is what it's going to look like. And at the bottom down here, you're going to see common waterfront hazards because this is the waterfront safety guide. And so you look at the common hazards of drowning, slips, trips, and falls, ergonomics, inclement weather, and so on. What it's going to provide you is what are the typical hazards related to that? What are the prevention tips? And what are some of the control measures? As well, there are additional resources contained within these documents. These are excellent resources, a starting point for developing your health and safety policies, programs, procedures, safe work practices. Have a look at these documents. They're going to help you tremendously in making sure that your workplace is safe and looking at things that you may have overlooked, or it's just been second nature. You may have owned the marina for 50 years, and these are just common things to you, and it's common sense. But unfortunately, common sense isn't all that common to people, so you need to plan, you need to train your workers. Next, some of the other categories, we have resources on slips, trips, and falls, heat stress. As Will indicated, heat stress is one of the common hazards they are certainly going to be focusing on, because heat stress is a significant concern. So we've got some documents to assist on that as well. Reference to the OHSA site. They have created a really good toolkit to help assess the level of heat stress, as well as helping you to develop your hot weather plan. So what do you do? What are the control measures you have in place to keep your workers from getting heat stress? Lifting devices, we've already had some discussions on that, but we have more information and links to help with lifting device hazards, as well as working alone. Again, reference to the CCOHS website, and then a stop, think, and act document on our website. So those are just a snippet of some of the free downloads that you can access to help comply, to help keep your workplace safe and prepare for these ministry visits. Next, I want to briefly talk about some of our consulting services. So we have some free health and safety assessments. One is our health and safety checkup tool. It's basically looking at the basic legal compliance, and we can walk through that checklist with you. We can come on site, we can do it virtually. We also have a similar version on our website at the Small Business Center. So you're going to get a link to those resources and checklists as well. But we can also do a material handling assessment with you as well, all at no charge. We can look at and review your WSIB safety or your WSIB statistics with you, or if you'd like to access that you're on your own, the information, you can access the WSIB safety check site. And that's available. You can look at injury statistics for any company. So if you're looking at hiring a contractor to come out, maybe for your lifting devices, or maybe you're even doing a construction project at the marina and you're deciding between 2 or 3 contractors, you can go to the WSIB website, look for the safety check, and compare safety statistics between different contractors if you're trying to use that to help make a decision which one you would like to hire. We also have our small business advisory service, in which we can connect you with one of our volunteers to help provide you with information to help develop your program. And they're volunteers that come to us, and we connect you, and they help you with your health and safety program. Next, we have a really great referral program that has just recently been created between the ministry and WSPS, in which if you unfortunately get some orders and you need to comply, you are now eligible for a free day of consulting. So we can now come on site and help you comply with the orders, provide you with kind of some personalized service in order to help get you up to speed. So that's a really great new initiative that has taken place. Now, we still got the confidentiality of, we don't go running back to them to tell them what we see or what we do. So rest assured on that. It is just a referral that if you show us a copy of your order, we will provide you with free services to help you comply with that order.
It's a really good program. I really recommend it. The inspectors are encouraging employers to use this when they issue orders, because a lot of times the employer wants to be compliant, they want to comply, but maybe they're just not sure how to. So this is a great program where they can assist you with that. So.
Yeah, it's excellent. And then lastly is the WSIB Financial Incentive Program that I mentioned, called Health and Safety Excellence Program, or the HSET program, in which you join the program and you work on your health and safety program. You develop a standard, you communicate it, you train it, you implement, so you evaluate it after a couple of months of it been working, and then you make any corrections, and you report that back and tell the WSAB all the wonderful things you've been doing. And I believe now kind of with the we have a new leadership program, which is basically for specifically for small businesses, and you're eligible for a minimum of $1,000 rebate for that program. So really excellent, helps you to be compliant, motivates you. If the studies have shown that if you're working on your health and safety program, you're implementing policies and procedures, you are safer than companies that don't. Hence, you're having less accidents, less costs. So it is a win-win program on that. So that's the end of the official presentation with resources and what they're going to be focusing on. I'd like to turn it back to folks in the Safety Connection here. Are there any additional questions that you have, things that we can clarify? While you guys are thinking about that, I've got another one for Will, which is one that I commonly get asked, is around life jackets. And what are the requirements for life jackets at marinas?
Yeah, so the legislation actually says that, that it's a two-part legislation, and it says that, you should wear a life jacket or a life preserver when you're working near water, or have safety procedures in place. So that's where you need to do, again, your risk assessment to see your workers are working around water. And if they're not wearing, the life jackets, then what other things might be in place to protect the workers where they are there. So it's a two-part legislation. So that's why I'll have to call up the legislation to get what actual section it is. But yeah, that's the way we address it.
I believe, yeah, section 86, and it does
86.
also it talks about written procedures.
That's right. This is one of the few sections in the in any of our legislation that actually has it where it needs to be in writing. So I can read it out to you. Just so, where a worker is exposed to the hazard of falling into a liquid that is of sufficient depth for a life jacket or other personal flotation device to be effective as protection from the risk of drowning, there shall be an alarm system and rescue equipment appropriate in the circumstances to ensure the worker's rescue from the liquid, and A, the worker shall wear a life jacket or other personal flotation device that is appropriate in the circumstances. And this is where it says, or B, the employer shall develop and implement written measures and procedures to prevent the worker from drowning.
Now, an alarm system. What might constitute an alarm system? I mean, if I've got another worker and I've got a whistle, or I'm going to yell, help, is that sufficient alarm system?
And some of the alarm systems we have are, it detects liquid. So if the person is to fall in, then an alarm goes off and activates the, workers nearby, or activates a supervisor knowing that, okay, this worker is working near liquid, and the alarm just went off. So they've actually could possibly have fallen in liquid and they need to respond and have an emergency response. So,
but I'm thinking about the worker on the dock, that kind of thing. That.
Yeah, it could be something that an alarm system of a horn or a bell, something like that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anything from the chat? Anybody would like to come off of mute for clarification on anything? Have you seen these alarm systems in the field? Can you give some examples of what written procedures would contain to prevent drowning?
Yeah, I've never seen them in the field in a marina type setting. I've seen them in it was actually the only time I've actually seen it was in a confined space apparatus.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of too.
Where they're in an area, say like a sewer or a manhole, where they're wearing this so that if something happens and they fall into the water, then they know that we have to implement a rescue. I've never seen them in your aspect, so it's something that is there, but it's not a definite requirement. And written procedures is that's where you do your risk assessment of your workplace to say, okay, if the workers are working on the dock, they do fall into the water. How is there going to be a lifeguard nearby? Or are you going to always have two people at a time working together when they're around water? That could be a written procedure that nobody goes around the water by themselves, that they never do that alone, that type of thing.
Okay. We have another question in the chat. Does safe fueling require staff to wear pants for marinas not in an industrial establishment? And if so, what type of fabric?
I apologize. That answer I can't provide. I'm not sure exactly what it calls for fueling, because fueling is generally covered under I think it's the TSSA.
TSSA, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not. I apologize, but I'm sure we could probably find that out for you and get back to you. Shorts and a muscle shirt. I don't think that would be adequate.
Yeah, I'm not sure what TSSA thinks. I'm just looking at it from the hazard of what's the likelihood of the fuel getting on you, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What about if the similar to the question that was asked before, I'm a boat owner, my boat's in the marina, and I'm having somebody come in to clean the boat, or my own personal mechanic that I've hired to do repairs, not the marina mechanic. Are those individuals covered in this initiative?
Yeah, as soon as they come onto the workplace, as soon as they come into the marina, into the workplace, they now are considered someone that the employer needs to look after their safety when they're there, because now they're workers, right? So they're coming into the marina now as workers. So then you have a joint employer responsibility to make sure that they're safe as well.
Joint employer. So would there be liability on the marina even though the boat owner has hired them?
And then it depends if they're, if there was an incident and it involves something that is owned by the marina, something that is controlled by the marina. Say they borrow a ladder from the marina to do the work the cleaning of the boat or something, and then the ladder breaks and they fall off. So then we might look at, okay, what was the training of the worker, what was the condition of the ladder, and who owned the ladder, and then that's where if you are doing something like that, I would really recommend that you have the contractor, whoever's coming on site, to utilize all their own equipment so that you're not taking that liability on yourself.
Okay, we've got, could the owner be considered the employer? So in that circumstance where I'm the boat owner, I've hired the mechanic, could I be considered the employer?
Yeah, and absolutely. If you can, there is an aspect of that. If you read the definition of employer in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, employer means a person who employs one or more workers or contracts the services of one or more workers, to include a contractor or subcontractor who performs work or supplies services, and a contractor or subcontractor who undertakes with the owner, constructor, contractor, or subcontractor to perform work or supply services. So it does, you can see the definition of employer does include contractors and subcontractors. So that would apply a little bit more when you're actually employing the contractor or subcontractor. But again, we would, it's definitely on a case-by-case basis. We would look at, okay, what happened in there, what happened incident, how much involvement was the owner of the marina involved in the task that was being done. So, and there might be times where we can come in and say, yep, there was nothing to do with you. This was just strictly something going on between the boat owner and the contractor.
And I think, as you say, it's going to be looked on a case-by-case basis, because I think, as you mentioned, if they're using the marina's equipment, the marina's ladder, now there might be some liability. It's not always as clear, cut and dry.
Yeah, there's never an absolute yes or no answer to that, but it could be, maybe.
Okay. And I just want to, oh, wait a minute. Pat has put a second part. What about the boat owner? So I'm assuming that is about the liability for the boat owner.
Yes. Yeah. In that case, we would, we'd have to, we'd probably end up looking at the contract, like how did the owner hire that person? And they could be deemed as an employer as well because they're hiring a contractor to do a job. And, just like when, if you look at a roofing company that comes in to do somebody's roof, if there was a hazard from the house that the owner didn't tell the employer about, they could be held liable as well. So there is some liability for the boat owner as well. But in most cases, we would just look at the employer of the contractor and make sure that they've done everything that they can.
Okay, excellent. And I think I just want to echo, Tova has just indicated that the training on response also becomes a hot topic. Non-entry rescue isn't as easy as it looks and presents the risks to the rescuers. So even more so if the worker in the water is injured. So exactly, just to echo what I mentioned before, you've got now an unconscious person or bleeding, or maybe they broke their arm. How are you getting that person out of the water?
That's right.
All things to consider with your emergency planning. Now, going back to some of these yacht clubs and other businesses that may have volunteers working, if maybe we can just review the definition of a worker, and what if the yacht club only has volunteers? Are they covered under the Occupational Health and Safety Act? If you can maybe elaborate a little bit on that, Will.
Sure. Yeah, actually, as I mentioned earlier, the definition or the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Labor is all related to workers. So sometimes the definition of a worker is very important when we're looking at, especially when there's an injury, and including volunteers. So one of the main aspects of the definition of a worker is that they receive monetary compensation. So we always say we follow the money. So is there any money being exchanged here? And it doesn't have to be money. It's a monetary compensation. It could be, a free boat slip. It could be we'll give you, free meals. We give you, some aspect. If there is some exchange of something that is of a monetary value, then they could be deemed a worker. But if it is a strictly volunteer, they're not getting anything out of this other than they feel good about helping out the marina, then it's a strictly volunteer, and we don't have jurisdiction. That's not saying that the volunteer may not turn around and sue you civilly for the accident. So there's always that aspect that you need to be concerned. You can't just say, I don't have to worry about the volunteers and doing any training with them because the Ministry of Labor they're not workers. But yeah, there's that aspect of the civil liability of the employer as well. And a good example of that is maybe like a golf course where you have the marshals on the golf course. A lot of them are retired people that, they do this marshaling around the golf course and they get a free golf membership out of it. Well, we would consider them workers because they are getting a monetary compensation, being the golf membership.
Yeah, and I think in this case, relating it to the marinas, with the yacht clubs, they may very well be getting a free slip or something of value, of monetary value.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Another thing that I sometimes get asked is around ladders. And am I able to work from a ladder? So maybe you're climbing in and out of the boat on a ladder. Maybe you've got somebody that's buffing the side of the boat. They're doing some work from a ladder. Is that allowed?
It is allowed to a height. That is allowed when you're doing 3-point contact. You have to maintain 3-point contact when going ascending or descending the ladder. So you can't have your arms full of stuff while climbing the ladder. Once you get to your work location, then you can work from that location without 3-point contact. But once you're going up and down, then you need to have your 3-point contact. And so that might require some pre-planning that I'm going to go up the ladder and then somebody's going to, hand what I need up to me, so that I'm able to work at it from that point. Again, you got to make sure that the ladder's in good condition. It's on firm footing. It's not going to fall. Sometimes you may require someone to hold the ladder while you're doing it. But with any ladder, once you're over 10 feet, then you need to have a fall protection, fall prevention of some aspect to prevent the worker. So that might prevent the worker from falling. So that way maybe you need a scissor lift or scaffolding of some type to be able to do that work.
And that's measured from the ground to the bottom of your feet, that 10-foot
Absolutely, that's
level.
correct. That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from anyone on the line? Anybody care to unmute or write anything else in the chat?
Oh, can't unmute. So
Oh, yeah, you do need to raise your virtual hand and then we will unmute you in the background. Okay, if we can unmute Pat, please.
That should be unmuted now.
Okay, go ahead, Pat.
There you go. I'm curious about the conversation about ladders. I work around boat yards a lot, and ladders. Section 73 doesn't actually mention anything about three-point contact. So where are you getting that from the manufacturer's instructions?
correct. Yeah, that's
Okay.
ladder safety. A lot of every tool that is being used by employers or whatnot, we always go back to what does the manufacturer's specifications say about the ladder. And it could be the weight ratings and whatnot is to be looked at as well, and that's under that as well.
Yeah, I always felt that you would use that if you needed to, manufacturer's instructions about ladder use, but it's nice to hear it from the ministry itself.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we kind of hang our hat on a lot of equipment, because we can't, the regulation is not all encompassing. We can't have everything in there. So that's what we always say, what does the manufacturer's specification say to do?
Yeah, okay. That just confirms that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Pat. Thanks for the question.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? Anybody like to raise your virtual hand? Oh, we've got some more in the chat. I have some questions about operator competency for non-motorized watercraft. Some of my friends just got jobs as kayak tour guides, for instance. What are the expectations?
So this is, so for the, so they're not, I guess you still have to do some training with them as far as what are the hazards they're going to be exposed to while they're out on that kayak tour. So I don't think there's any aspects of the boater safety that you need to have a boat safety license or anything like that, because it's a kayak. But the employer would still need to do a risk assessment to see what the employer or what the worker, when they're out on these kayaks, what they're being exposed to, and make sure that they have the safety training, the safety equipment in place for these workers.
Yeah, because I'm thinking if you're a kayak tour operator, I'm thinking some of the tours that are out in British Columbia where you're going out whale watching, some of the hazards might be very different than if you're going on a river versus a lake versus something with rapids. What are the risks? What could go wrong? What if you get stuck and you have to stay overnight? What are the safety precautions? So just echoing what Will has said about completing that risk assessment, thinking about all the what ifs, and then putting in controls, making sure the workers are aware of what those are and have access to them. So going back to, I know you don't need the pleasure craft operator card, but you're still going to need the safety gear and things like that other pieces of legislation require.
Yeah, it could be helmets, could be communication devices of some type to be able to radio back for assistance. Yeah.
Even just re-entering the kayak in the event of a rollover or flip. Absolutely, yeah. How do you do that? Yes. Do we have any other questions? Well, in the email that everybody will receive, you will get our contact information. So feel free, if questions come up after the fact, that you want to reach out to either Crystal or myself. And I believe, Will, do we have your contact information? But
I can
First
provide.
point can be Crystal or myself. We can ask the questions because we're the prevention folks, and we can try and get the information for you if we don't have the answer. You will be getting a copy of a PDF version of the slides, as well as links to all the resources that we have provided. So I think with that, unless we've got any last minute questions coming in or virtual hands going up, oh, there's one. Will the MLITSD be coordinating at all with Transport Canada regarding enforcement for commercial vessel requirements?
No, generally we do not. Transport Canada would be federal, and yeah, we have not done that. And what? Sorry, just as a question, with just from lack of knowledge, what would we be communicating, coordinating with them? What would?
Tova, did you want to come off of mute to clarify what you're specifically? I think what she's getting at, but Jessica, if you can unmute Tova in the meantime, what you'll be getting at is if you hire, like I'm thinking of some places where you are hiring a vessel for to take people to an island, take people on a tour, there are some Transport Canada requirements.
Hi there, it's Tova.
I don't.
Yeah, so the question was sort of around when we look at expectations, I wasn't sure whether the MLITSD would be considering, for instance, the safety equipment requirements. I know that the MLITSD doesn't strictly, isn't responsible for enforcing anything related to Transport Canada. In terms of the worker side of this, a lot of the vessels that find their way into marinas and to these types of operations, they're not actually pleasure craft. They meet the definition of being commercial vessels. And so I'm wondering whether the inspectors are going to be using, I was wondering whether or not there was any coordination. It sounds like there isn't, and that's okay. And whether the inspectors were going to be using sort of the bar of, with every reasonable precaution to say, if this is a commercial vessel, we expect to see commercial vessel level stuff. There's a higher number of flares. There's, you need, there's a different level of equipment and a different level of competency that's expected if you are operating a commercial vessel versus just a pleasure craft where a PCOC and often some hopes and prayers are considered adequate.
Yeah, and for aspects like that, we would have to, we look at those specific jurisdictions, and we need to stay in our lane as far as for the Ministry of Labor. If this is a commercial craft, they may fall under federal jurisdiction, and so then those workers, we would not have jurisdiction over those workers or those jurisdiction over what the requirements are on their boat and whatnot. It would be just not something that we couldn't enforce.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I see Pat has his hand up now as well.
Yeah, I don't think you actually need to be a commercial vehicle to be Transport Canada registered. My boat is Transport Canada registered, and I go to their standards, but I'm not a commercial vehicle. So any boat can be commercial, or could be Transport Canada.
Transport Canada. Okay.
Yeah, all of the vessels are Transport Canada. Like when you register a vessel, you're registering it with Transport Canada. The PCOCs, those are all granted by Transport Canada. What's interesting about commercial versus pleasure craft is that when you go into the regulations for the two, the equipment and competency requirements for pleasure craft are a little bit different than they are for commercial vessels. So you can still have people that are likely working in provincially regulated work, but like the tour guides I was talking about, some of my friends doing that, the vessels, they end up with Transport Canada requirements for the stuff that they need on board, but they're still provincially regulated in the sense that, they're covered by the ESA and
So
they would be covered by the OHSA.
They all need to be the SOLAS, the safety of lives at sea regulation that came out of the Titanic sinking. And most of the Transport Canada stuff is for commercials, all SOLAS approved.
No, it's an interesting point from both of you. That was great. That's I've never thought of contacting Transport Canada and coordinating any of this with them. So maybe that would be something I could do, is reach out and let at least make them aware that we have this initiative ongoing. But then again, it's still, and I know that we still have transport companies that are registered with Transport Canada, even though we still enforce the Occupational Health and Safety Act at some of their workplaces. If they're just doing transport equipment around Ontario, then they would fall under our jurisdiction. But as soon as they start going interprovincial, then they become federal jurisdiction. But some are still registered with Transport Canada, even though they're just working within Ontario. So yeah, there could be some aspects there. So yeah, I'll follow up on that. Thanks for that.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, on behalf of WSPS, I want to thank Will for participating with us, as well as all of our participants for joining in, and look forward to connecting with you in the future, providing some assistance as well. Please feel free to share this information with some of your colleagues and other businesses, other marinas that may be covered under this initiative, because we want to get the word out there and rather have you prepared ahead of time and get your ducks in a row before a visit. And hopefully you will have a great visit should one happen. Oh, and then we have somebody asking, will we get notice before arrival? Will, do your inspectors let workplaces know when they're arriving?
That's the fun part of being an inspector, is we don't give notice before we arrive. We just show up. So and the reason we do that is we want to see the workplace the way it is on an everyday basis without you knowing. Like, we gave you a call and said, hey, we're coming in next Thursday. There's a chance that you may do a really good cleanup and hide any unsafe equipment. Not saying that you would, but there are employers that would. And so we want to see the way the workplace is and on an everyday basis that the workers are being exposed to. So that's why we don't provide it. We show up unannounced, and it's in our legislation that is in the Occupational Health and Safety Act that we're permitted to do that. So.
Okay. Oh, and it looks like we've had another question come in about how far does I'm going to say the eastern border go? So I know I had mentioned at the beginning, that was one of my questions with Muskoka, Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Northumberland. Missed the eastern border, then over to Quebec, right?
Yep. Right to the Quebec border, right through Trenton, Kingston, Cornwall, Hawkesbury, right up through there.
Yeah, that whole 401 corridor. And then right up to Muskoka and across. What about like Algonquin Park? Would they be considered in?
There's a little portion of Algonquin Park almost up to Mattawa. I think just a little bit before Mattawa is when the eastern becomes northern region. So.
Okay. And how far west? So how far along that 401 corridor does it go?
I think I'm trying to remember the name of the town. It's just a little bit past Trenton.
I think Suzanne had indicated Northumberland. Does that sound right?
Northumberland is part of the eastern region there, yeah. And
then up through Peterborough, Kawartha Lakes, Haliburton, all of Muskoka.
Yep.
Yep, Bracebridge, Gravenhurst, right over to Perry Sound. Is that still part of, or is Perry Sound? Okay, and McTier.
I'm not sure where that is, so but if you're curious, shoot me a message, and I can let you know whether you're in our region or not.
Okay. Great. Well, I will get back to because I know we have somebody from McTier just to confirm whether they're in the region. So I'll follow up with you on that one.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. Oh, another one coming in. Last boater safety message. We are heading into statistically the most dangerous weekend of the year. The water is still dangerous, dangerously cold, but the air is warm. Yes. Big concerns. And in some areas, I'm coming to you from the Trent Severn Waterway. The water levels they're coming down, but it is very fast moving. They delayed
Yeah.
opening some of the locks and swing bridges around my area, so my boat will not be launched this weekend due to the high water levels.
Yeah, and just to let you know, even though this initiative's technically started on May 1st, we've asked the inspectors to hold off on areas that have high water levels, because the last thing you guys want is us to be there when you guys are dealing with these types of scenarios. So we don't want to be that that person in there. You're making it even worse for you. So
Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody again and take care. Look forward to hearing from you.
thanks, everyone.